We're back. We're here with Glenn Diggs. He is a member of the Chelmsford Board of Selectmen. We appreciate you coming on.
Thank you.
Short notice, too.
Well, that's all right. I won't shake your hand. I have a bad cold. I don't want to spread the germs.
Well, I appreciate that. Well, we definitely have a lot to talk about. I know, you had recently brought up at one of the last meetings tax classification. I know we're going to get into that. So, wanted to, obviously hear not only about that, but also I think you have recently proposed a ballot question as well. Is that true? So we'll have you kick it off and tell us
Sure.
what it is you're doing. And
Sure. In November, late November and early December, each year, the Board of Selectmen vote on tax classification. The town has a very strong town manager form of government, but one of the powers that has been reserved for the Board of Selectmen is setting the tax rate in terms of it's a single rate or a dual rate. The difference is that in a single rate, both residential and commercial industrial properties are taxed at the same value. In last year, I think it was $18 and almost $19, but $18.06.
Okay.
$18.06. And the industrial was taxed at $18.06. Under a dual tax rate, the residents would be taxed lower than that, theoretically, unless we have a reduction overall, but I don't think that's going to happen. And businesses would be taxed at a higher rate. Under the first pass, meaning that Chelmsford has a 1-1 now, a town that has a 1-1 can set a dual rate as much as 1.5%. In other words, if the tax rate is $18 and you vote a dual tax rate, that $18 will go down to let's say $2 less. And the commercial rate will go up, not necessarily by $2, but whatever the shortfall is of the combined tax dollars of the residential community, the industrial community would have to pick that up. And there was, we voted on this when I was first on the board 2 years ago. I believe we came up, it always comes up the same time of year, and the Board of Selectmen voted 5-0 to keep it as a single rate. And being a new member of the Board of Selectmen, I really didn't know too much about it. But as you get more and more involved in town government, you learn more and more information. We also had initiative for the 129 area to change the zoning and so forth. We were successful in bringing on a business director, Lisa Maroney, who will be spearheading a lot of the efforts of the town, creating new business climate out there and in other parts of the town. And when we came to vote on it this year, and it was brought up in late November, we decided to hold it over for 2 weeks. We have meetings every other week. And as such, we concluded the first night by saying we wanted people to come to our meeting and speak about were they favorable to it, were they not favorable to it, so forth and so on. And what ended up was that virtually no one from the residential community came to speak with us. Instead, we had quite a few people from the business side, particularly the Chelmsford Business Association, which I think you're a member.
I am.
All right, and
three
it's a credit to you because your show is ecumenical as far as I've ever known it, that you bring both sides to the table.
Always.
And there is no right or wrong on this, per se. It's a matter of what the town feels is the best for its citizens and its business community. And we felt, and voting 3-2 against it, we left it the same way, but it didn't seem to be that it was done yet, because there was really no vetting of the issue. Because it comes up in late November, almost nobody knows about it, and then we vote on it. The only people that know about it is the business community because they have a vested interest because they would be the ones who would pay more taxes. And you would expect that would be the right thing for them to do. So we said, okay, what would be the fairest way to bring the town to an enlightened situation where they all understand what this dual tax rate is? And we thought, well, it could be brought to a non-binding referendum to town meeting. But town meeting has about 162, I think, members, and it didn't seem to be wide enough a group. So we decided instead to suggest that it be put on the ballot as a non-binding referendum. There was some talk about how much detail we should express in that. It could be that it could be just a simple statement with a lot of rhetoric under it, explaining, going into more detail, or it could just be the simple statement. And what we decided to do in the end was just make it a simple statement. And that is, should the town of Chelmsford have a dual tax rate? The Board of Selectmen can select, as I said earlier, anywhere up to 1.5%. Now, once a town is at 1.5%, as the years go by, the state allows towns to increase that. For example, I had asked the town assessor to do a little analysis for me. And basically, I just wanted to know kind of what the local climate was in terms of this. So what he did was he put together a little list, and I asked him to group all the towns that are contiguous to Chelmsford. And then I told him to put another group of all the towns that were contiguous to those towns, and then another list of the towns that were contiguous to those lists. So you had about 6 that were contiguous to Chelmsford, and about 10 that were contiguous to those, and about 20 that were contiguous to those. In general, about half of the communities do have a dual tax rate. Among the towns that are contiguous to Chelmsford, you have Lowell, which again was at 1.75, and the week after we voted against it, they raised theirs to 1.87. So the taxes for a business in Lowell are almost twice the rate of a residential property. Lowell is at 1.87, Billerica is 1.75, Tewksbury is 1.52. There's a town that I don't kind of group in it, which is Carlisle, because I don't feel that they're quite representative of the rest of the towns.
Yeah, I don't even know why they have one business.
Yeah.
Really, I mean, they're the country store, I think.
So we looked at it from the standpoint of, if you think of the marijuana situation, there was a non-binding referendum on the state ballot, and everybody voted. Some towns voted favorably to it, and some towns, like Chelmsford, voted against it. But Chelmsford voted very narrowly against it. Because Chelmsford voted narrowly against it, it was left up to the town meeting to decide its fate. So that if a majority of town meeting voted to allow marijuana in the town, it would go forward, if a majority voted against it. However, if that small margin had flipped in Chelmsford, it would have gone to the general public. That same general public that voted initially for it, if it had gone that way. So, I don't look at, there's been a lot of chatter in Facebook and saying that the Board of Selectmen have kind of shirked their responsibilities because it's up to them to decide whether it should be that. But at the same time, I think there's a greater good that is met when you have the public cast their votes in terms of their feelings about something that's serious, because this is very serious. There's no doubt that we did a lot of stepping with our right foot. In other words, we changed the zoning on 129. We hired a business director. And we're trying to get more and more of everybody excuse me, in line in terms of their focus on business development and residential development, which is part of it. But we still need to know what the general public feels of what Chelmsford should be. I mean, at town meeting, they overwhelmingly voted for 129, which said that, for many years, Chelmsford was a lazy bedroom community. We didn't really want development. We could have it over here, but we really didn't want it too much. That vote was a substantial change from that. So we don't know how they're going to vote. Some people have felt, well, we put a simple question on there, what idiot would not vote for less taxes? But our goal is simply to get out there and inform the public as much as we can about both sides of the issues. There are some definite negatives to increasing it in the commercial rate, because in some ways you're casting a vote saying, you know, we don't want you here. Whereas over here we're saying, we want you over here. So it's not an easy issue. Some comments have been that this is a difficult subject. Now, I'm not particularly overly bright. I don't think the average person in Chelmsford would have a hard time understanding this, especially if we give them some documentation, simple documentation saying this is what the impact would be. Certainly, there is a large proportion of Chelmsford, and I guess it's a couple of years, we'll have 30% will be seniors most living on fixed incomes, which this will help. But the general feeling is, even if we were to do it down the road, we would not go to 1.5. We just feel that, I think, can't speak for the whole board, but personally I think that would be too much of a stepping stone at once. Based on last year, the tax rate at, let's say, 1.1 would have resulted in no new taxes for anyone. Now, taxes go up every year, and people have made the comment that, well, this is not a long-term solution. Taxes are going to go up next year. Absolutely, they're going to go up next year. They go up every year because the budget goes up. Because of Proposition 2.5, you increase your tax base by 2.5%, and that's where it's capped. But what will be saved if you were to install something like this? Let's say it saved the average homeowner $300 on the tax bill a year. They would save that $300 every year, forever, as long as that percentage was kept the same. If they increase the percentage, there would be more savings. If they decrease the percentage, there would be less savings. And that's all we're trying to say in that, please tell us what you think. Because the next step would be, well, we had a majority who cast their vote on it. I think we need to set up some sort of committee, representative of various groups in town, that will study the issue. Now, Westford just went around that step, and last week or the week before, they announced, the Board of Selectmen announced they're going to set up a committee to evaluate tax classification. And right now, they're at 1.1, like we are. So I don't know where theirs is going to go. But the idea is that we just need more input. We don't know everything, and when we don't know something, it behooves us to go find out how people feel about it.
The one thing I will say is that you can dumb it down to say that it's not that complicated, but I do think that there are components to it that actually do make it complicated, and I'm going to throw these out there and you can tell me how you feel about this. One of the things is I've been in commercial real estate now for several years, and I'm not sure that the general public knows or cares to educate themselves necessarily on how triple nets work. So a lot of things that happen when you talk about commercial property is a building may be on a triple net, which means that the actual occupant is now paying the taxes that that building is taxed for. So when you're looking at, say, a strip mall, you know, you could take 3 trolls who's leased on a triple net, you increase on the commercial base, and now this small business that's pouring its heart and soul into trying to stay alive is now paying more to stay in that location. That could potentially put them out of business.
Well, there's a second question on the ballot, and that is, should we provide, if we do have a dual tax rate, should we provide up to a 10%, and I think most people are going to say it should be 10%, discount for small businesses, and small business is classified with 2 caveats. They have to meet both. One is they have to have less than 10 employees, and one is they have to do $10 million, less than $10 million in value. And I think that many will meet that criteria. You know, there is about 450, if I remember correctly, there's about 450 businesses in Chelmsford. Most of the major ones, the owners are not in town. They are out of town. There are some who are in town, but most of them are out of town. And it's the you know, there can be some people who make the case that the residents are somehow helping to pay those businesses to be in business, even if they don't have a solid business plan. That they're marginal to begin with, but they're only there because the residents are taking it on the chin. Now, I don't know. I want to learn more. I want the business community to come out strong and vet all these issues out, like the one you just brought out. I want the residents to come out and talk about their issues. You know, you have a situation where sooner or later, we're going to have a debt override to pay for a new school, one way or another. It's inevitable. That's probably $300, $400 every year on your tax bill for the next, I don't know, 20, 30 years. It would seem more probable that the townspeople would accept that if they were getting some savings on another side. You also have a situation where there's, you know, there was an overhaul of the tax, federal tax standards, and businesses, you know, in general are going to make out a little bit on that. Residents will, but there's a time factor on when that will catch up. And so everybody's looking at all these, you know, small parts. Yes, the basic question is simple, but you're right, the nuances really need to be talked about so that people can make informed decisions.
I think the other component too, and this is complicated, but when you look at how property is assessed, so you have a total assessment, right? So I'll make this up. We'll just take, you have a commercial building, it's assessed at
average tax bill in Chelmsford, commercial,
Right.
the average, but there's some that are way up here and there's some that are way down here, but the average is about 1.2 million.
Right, but let's say that your building's assessed at 500,000, your commercial building's assessed 500,000, the single family home's assessed at 500,000. In a long-term situation where you change the tax rates, and you'll see this in Lowell especially, commercial buildings are now assessed a lot lower in actual tax value as a result of having such a high tax rate, right? Because that affects the actual sale price. A lot of those buildings are not as valuable anymore. They end up going down in price. So, you know, there's a lot of, I guess, monkeying that can happen with kind of the assessment of values as they start to.
Well, my personal feeling is that the assessor in town is very fair and very thorough in how he goes about. There are various ways to assess property.
Oh, I don't disagree. I think
he does a very fair job. I think if this goes forward, there will not be any favoritism done. I don't think there could be favoritism done in the present system.
I don't think it's favoritism. I think what I'm bringing up is the fact that you're going to see a loss in value from businesses, from commercial buildings as a result of having a higher tax rate on commercial businesses. Because when you start to look at commercial buildings, typically people are looking at them for investment only. So they say, okay, how much income does this particular building derive? And then if a tenant now has to pay more in taxes on a triple net, or let's say they're on a gross, either way, the amount of money that building's now generating comes down. That's actually, if you talk to Frank Green, that's actually how he derives all of the value for a building. So if the building starts to come down in value, not only have the building owners lost money, but now you're not getting the same level of tax assessment. So maybe in the first year or two you see this surge for residents, but then I think in the long term it actually ends up plateauing out, and you can never go back, because at that point the shifting in value will just hurt residents even more. So you kind of almost have to stay at that differential tax rate. That's, I think, kind of the Pandora's box that I think the Business Association looks at and says this could be problematic.
Well, the fact is that there are over half the towns that are contiguous to Chelmsford, contiguous to those towns, and contiguous to the next, have split tax rates. Many of those towns are doing phenomenally well. Chelmsford had a fixed rate for the last 20 years. Tell me about how it improved things in town. Didn't improve them at all in terms of having more and more of an industrial base against the residential base. Now, yes, there wasn't the 129 overlay, but 20 years and doing nothing. I mean, you have companies moving out of Chelmsford, moving to towns that have higher taxes. You know, they just do it because of, when you're looking, and I've met with various economic directors from other towns, from some that have been very successful, and they say, look, when a company is looking to come to Chelmsford or Billerica or Burlington, wherever the case may be, the tax rate is important. It's on the list of 10 things that they're looking at. but it's down near the bottom. It is not near the top. At the top is, will it furnish, does it have the space that we want? Does it have the water and sewage that we want? Does it have the power that we want? What's the school system? What kind of town is it? What's, you know, all these issues come into play, but they're way ahead of the tax rate. And so you're right in that you bring these things up, and these things need to be talked about a lot. And that's why we did it now. Some people say, well, why don't you wait till November election when it's closer to making a decision? And the answer is simply that there's no time. You know, if you go to a town election in November, what time is there left to talk about it? We got to vote on it in the first week of December. So there's really no time. So this is a long lead time that needs to be done. And again, I hope that if it's successful, and it may not be. If we have the residents come out and they say, you know, close, or a majority say, no, we don't feel a dual tax rate is for our town, I'll vote the other way. All right? But we're just trying to get a feel for what they're saying. We're not trying to shirk our responsibilities. We're trying to learn more, because when you're in town government, there's an insurmountable amount of information that you need to gather to make the proper decisions. In some cases, it takes years to do it. That's why we're fortunate on our board in that we have 2 people with 3 terms of experience, and they're up for re-election, and you know, others who have experience. You know, if we had a board of all new people, they probably wouldn't have the wherewithal to make these kind of decisions. I just feel it's the right time to investigate it. Not necessarily to approve it, but it is the right time to investigate it. And that's what we're trying to do. And that's all we're trying to do.
Well, one of the things I've appreciated about you as selectman is that you're an out of the box thinker. All right, I not just this issue, but many issues. You've re-examined a lot of things that we've done across the board just to say, listen, this isn't status quo. Let's at least take a look at it. And for that reason, I think you're doing a good job. So it's not a personal thing, but when the business community looks at it, and if you look at the Chelmsford Business Association, who is typically the group that comes out on this particular issue, they've been pretty transparent about it. If you go on their website, the whole entire mission of their group was to always be there to defend the single rate tax structure. They have it right on the front of their website. So I give them some credit for the fact that they don't hide behind the fact that that is who they are and what they represent. They've been very clear about that for a long period of time. One question I have for you, and I want to bring this up because when I was at the CBA dinner, I was talking to somebody about classification, and I was actually surprised by the answer, because this person said, yes, I'm very much in favor of a split tax rate.
Was this a member of the CBA?
Yes, because he owns 28
You're going to be on the committee.
No, I got 4 kids. I got to read books and do all sorts of other stuff. He said he was very excited about it because he owns 28 single-family homes in Chelmsford that he rents out, and so that if they split the tax rate, he actually becomes a windfall of it because it's a business for him. So those are all residential houses that he rents out. How do you, in fairness, give a huge boon to one person that's doing a business through residential and take away from people that are on the commercial side?
You can look at any government program. They're not all fair to all groups. There's some winners, some losers. It's designed so that most people are winners, and that's what this is. There's another item we could have put on the ballot. I didn't put the question because, we could put 20 questions on it.
Fair enough.
None of them will have meaning. But there is another thing called a residential exemption, and that is that we could allow a certain portion of value to be deducted from a property for tax purposes. For example, let's say that an average house in Chelmsford, which is about $450,000 now, let's say the tax rate was $20, that's $9,000. The average bill in town now is it's about $7,200. But let's say it was $9,000. So you could say that a residential home would be exempt for the first $100,000. So if you take $100,000 times $20 is the rate, that's 200 or 2,000? 2,000. But the difference in that, doing it that way, is that once you do it to only to a classification, those properties that don't fit into that specific category have to pick up the difference. For example, who would pick up the difference in that? When you have a split rate, the shortfall on the residential is picked up by the business community.
Right.
Pretty simple to see that that's where it goes. But in a residential exemption, that shortfall would then be applied to apartment owners. You have some apartments?
I do, yeah.
Okay.
As a matter of fact, they do this to me in Boston. This is exactly how they handle it.
You would have to pick up that seasonal properties, and the business community wouldn't change at all. So the idea is that that type of program is good for like seaside communities that have a big rental, like down the Cape Brewster, where people build a house and they rent it out for, and they just make money on it as a rental property. And most of the properties in town are in that category, so that you have a large base of properties in which you're shifting that balance to. In Chelmsford, that you'd be shifting it to a very small percentage, and those people, their taxes would just go out of sight.
So you're saying it would have to stay only within the residential, that it wouldn't shift across the board?
Right.
That's this
And so that's why we heard from some people that said, why don't you go that way? And we don't have the profile of types of residential properties that would make it fair. It would be totally unfair to people that have small rental units.
It's just tough because I understand arguments on both sides. You have seniors that are on fixed income. How do you best help that segment? Because I think a lot of it is derived from that, right? I mean, you've got people that are living on a fixed income. They don't want to leave their homes. They feel like they're being somewhat pushed out because of the level of taxes. But I look at really where we're being hurt the most is Chapter 70 funding. I mean, I look at how much money Westford gets well above us, and it just makes me want to puke because, quite frankly, our communities are comparable, and there's no reason in my mind that they should be getting so much more state aid than we do.
Well, that's a valid argument, except nobody's going to change that.
I know,
because if we were to get $5 million more, some other town would have to give up $5 million. That is not happening. That it would take really the governor with a strong, firm hand on the legislature to really come back and look at that and do it in a more fair way. At the time when they created it, it seemed like it was fair. There was a lot of argument about it. And for the most part, it worked early on. But as the years have rolled by, this inadequacy between one town and another town is really pointed. And I agree with you that it needs to be solved, but it isn't getting solved anywhere in the near future.
It's just unfortunate because I think it's created a lot of infighting because if you look at Chelmsford as a whole, there really is not a whole lot of waste. As a matter of fact, I think we do a very good job as a town of trying to get the most out of all of our services and pay the least amount of money. And even if you look at the schools, right? I mean, we did that whole entire ESCO upgrade, and it certainly created the heating issues that are going on. But we've done a lot of things to try to fix expenditures in our town, and so it's unfortunate that as a town that's completely underfunded, we're just stuck fighting with each other.
Well, that's the good part of Chelmsford. We have a lot of very dedicated officials who are very bright, and they find ways to do more with less. They have for years, and I expect they're going to continue to do that. Hopefully, with the 129 initiative, we will bring in more, and if they are doing as much as they're doing with the little sometimes they have, we bring in more, I'm sure we're going to be doing some great things in Chelmsford.
Tell us a little bit about Lisa Marone. Have you had an opportunity to meet with her? And
yes, Lisa had a relatively similar position in another town. She has just joined the town. She came on board first of the year. She's been going to various meetings, meeting all of the people in town who have to do with economic development. She's been going to some of the trade shows that where you're making contacts. She's been working with developers who may have an interest in Chelmsford, and she's working with architects like Katie Enright, who get in on the ground floor of various products or get the sense the way the wind is blowing. Again, she has a lot to learn, but I'm hopeful that in the future she's going to do some wonderful things for the town.
is she the person that you envisioned when you were kind of crafting this as a...
Yes, her personality is outgoing, which is one of the qualifications that I wanted to look for. Also, that she doesn't, when someone says no, she doesn't look at it as no. She looks at it as, well, not now. And that's what you have to have, because I'm sure in your business, real estate, people say, no, I'm not selling, and then 6 months later, they got a for sale sign on their house from somebody else. What? You told me you weren't going to sell there. And, but you have to have that mentality to keep going back and keep going back and keep it going back and stay in touch. And it's not only emails, but it's calling on the door and saying, I'm still here. You know, are you looking? You're not looking? What's the case may be? I know that we have someone who is building the 168 units on Middlesex Turnpike, picked up a piece of property, 2 acres on 129, and is trying to find a brew house type of restaurant. Not a chain. He's not looking for a chain. He's looking for a more homegrown kind of business to put out there. And I think it would be fabulous for Chelmsford. People keep telling me you got to call it the bar area the Lion's Den, which was a well-known establishment for many, many years in Chelmsford. And you know, right now it's if you want to go after work, I guess you go in the Brick House. But if you can say I'm going to Lion's Den, you know, that conjures up, you know, warm feelings, and hopefully that'll come to fruition someday.
Wow. Now, is that kind of a win then? Is that a developer seeing some success in Chelmsford and continuing on?
Yes. You know, he has yet to find the right builder. You know, his feeling, he expressed his feeling to the economic development team that probably in 2 years people will be knocking his door down because it's early on in the game at 129. But 2 years from now, the property wouldn't be available for sale. Someone may have gobbled it up. So he's in on the cutting edge of things, and I'm hopefully that someone will recognize the opportunity and come in and open something and be successful. You have all the housing developments that are going in all around that on Mill Street and on Turnpike, on Gorham, on Carlisle, that was just approved by the planning board. So there's a lot of people moving into town. They're going to want to eat somewhere, and when they do eat, we make a percentage of the bill as we take our little, you know, chit out of the total transaction, which then goes to fund various programs in the town. So there's a lot to be hopeful for. We've made some inroads, and you know the detractors of dual tax rate point to that as we don't want to kill the golden goose, and I feel that you won't be killing the golden goose if you do this. You will be making overall the town better. So that's where we're at.
Last but not least, how is your term been? I know I see you at almost every board meeting that's out there. You must be like so.
Well, it's you know, you try to tell people that the Board of Selectmen meetings are just the tip of the iceberg for members of the Board of Selectmen. Each member has about 8 subcommittees that they're supposed to stay in touch with. On top of that, there are ones that you're not supposed to keep in touch with, but you need to know what's going on with them because you don't get the same feeling that you do watching it on TV or many of the meetings on televised. For example, the economic development meetings aren't televised, but you need to be there and hear what they're doing. They're getting close to selecting a brand marketing for the 129 year. It's very exciting. I think they're on the right track. They're also going to be touching on classification, and rightfully so. They have a stake in that. So you're going to all these meetings, and you have to just recognize that it's part of the job. You know, I pointed that out to Lisa Maroney, for example, that not only do you work in day job, some hours you're going to be flexible because you need to go to the economic development, you're going to go to the ZBA, you need to go to the planning board, you need to see the people that are there, you need to talk to the people that are there, you need to have them on a first name basis and have all their numbers because you don't know, you may have 1, 2, 3, 4, and you need to know how to get from 1 to 4, but you don't know, but this person over here, they know how to get there. And you need to know who they are and how they can help you. So there's a lot of that going on. You know, we have the election coming up. I just want to
wrapping up. We get 10 seconds left, so.
Well, and the only other thing I should say is people should look into the energy situation in the town. The town can get them a lower energy cost, 9.04 kilowatt hours. Comcast right now is 1.49, and I'm switching.
All right, well, we thank you and stay tuned.